Okay, hi everyone. Um, Welcome to my channel, Tutorlini Test Prep. My name is Kyle. I've been a test prep professional for several years now, and I scored an 800 on the SAT Math. And the digital SAT is right around the corner, so I figured I would make a walkthrough for the digital SAT Math sample questions. So this is meant to be hopefully as descriptive as possible, and I will do my best to highlight the key concepts on each question. So let's jump into it. So let's see, question 1. So it says if f of x equals x plus 7 and g of x equals 7x, what is the value of 4 f of 2 minus g of 2? Okay, so when we have function notation, the thing inside the parentheses tells us our function input. Many times, right, that is our x. Our input is x. Okay? So, I think what we should do is we should kind of like off to the side, figure out what f of 2 and g of 2 are first, okay? So, f of 2, okay, x plus 7. So I replace x with 2. Remember, the parentheses tells me x is 2, so I replace x with 2. And it would be wise to usually to use parentheses, just in case there's some exponents or borders of operations, anything like that. So f of 2 equals 2 plus 7, which is 9. Now I'm going to do the same thing for g of x. G of 2 is 7x, so I write 7 times 2 in parentheses, and I get 14. Now all we have to do is plug this into the expression they gave us. So 4f of 2 minus g of 2 equals, so f of 2 is 9 and g of 2 is 14, so we just plug that in and we get 36 minus 14, which is 22. So the answer to this question is C. Okay, let's move on. All right, question 2. The y-intercept of the graph of y equals negative 6x minus 32 in the xy plane is 0, comma y. What is the value of y? Okay, so well, we gotta know slope-intercept form of a line. Y equals mx plus b. M is your slope, and b is the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. So we can just kind of look at this one, and you see b is the number that comes after x, right? So that b, or in the question they call it 0, comma y, you could call it b, you could call it y, is equal to negative 32. That's it. That's the answer. If you weren't sure, let's say, I don't know, for some reason you really want to know slope-intercept form, but let's say you forgot slope-intercept form, or let's say you got some wacky equation on the test and you weren't sure how to find the x-intercept or the y-intercept, right? So always remember, if you want to find the x-intercept, you plug in y is equal to 0, okay? And if you want to find the y-intercept, you plug in x equals 0. So let's say we forgot mx plus b, right? We could do this another way. So we could do y equals negative 6x minus 32, and we could plug in x equals 0. So y equals negative 6, 0, minus 32. Negative 6 times 0 is 0. So we get y equals negative 32. That's another way you could have done it. But again, I'm really just highlighting this in case you came across a different type of equation, which you couldn't just figure out the y-intercept by looking at it. For this one, we know y equals mx plus b, b is the y-intercept. So we can figure out the y-intercept just by looking at it. It's the constant term in the equation. Ready? Okay, question 3. So it tells us about, I always like to label the graph if it's not already labeled. So It tells us y is the total cost in dollars. And it tells us x, and let me see if I can squeeze this in here. X is the games purchased, okay? So it's the cost of a video game system plus X games, okay? So there's a lot going on here. It's asking us to interpret the slope. We'll get to that in a minute, but first, why don't we just calculate the slope or figure out the slope? So slope is, there's a couple ways to think about it. You could pick out 2 points and do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You could also just do rise over run. So I'm going to draw a little rise over run. And do you see how when we have a run of 1, there's a rise of 25? So the slope is 25 over 1, or just 25. Okay, so right away, there has to be a 25 in the correct answer, right? It's asking us about the slope. We just figured out that the slope was 25. So there has to be a 25 in the correct answer. So right away, I see 100 and 100. So right away, I'm going to cross those off, using process elimination. So now the question is it A or C? So here's how we interpret slope on the SAT. Okay, what you do is slope is the change in y when x goes up by 1. So it's the change in y when x goes up by 1. Why don't we do a quick example? Maybe 2 examples. So let's say I have y equals 4x minus 2. Okay. So the way I would interpret that is something like y increases by 4 when x goes up by 1. Or maybe say for each, y increases by 4 for each additional x. Let's do another one. Y equals negative 3x plus 5. So for this one, the slope is negative. So instead of saying increase, I'm going to say y decreases by 3 when x goes up by 1. Or a lot of time you'll see the word for each additional x. Something like that. And if it's like x was in years, it would say for each additional year, something like that. So some common words that you'll see for slope in the answer choices: increase, decrease, rate, each, per. Those are some common words you'll see in the answer choices for slope. Okay, so right away, I see the word each in A. So I'm kind of thinking it's A, but why don't we interpret it and then we'll go to the answer choices. So y, okay, so y, what's y? Y is the cost, right? So the cost, and we said it was 25, right? So the cost increases, and we should use the units. Cost is in dollars, right? So the cost increases by $25 when x goes up by 1, or for each additional x. And instead of x, I'm going to say game, because the x is the games purchased, right? So for each additional game purchased. So that would be how I would interpret the slope on this one. And we see that that sounds pretty close to A. Each game is costing me an extra $25. So that is the correct answer. C says the video game system costs $25. So that is wrong for a lot of reasons. The video game system cost is because it's the video game system plus X games, right? So if I bought 0 games, that would give me the video game system cost, right? So the video game system cost is the Y-intercept. So it not only is it not the slope, okay, it's not the slope, it's the Y-intercept. The number is wrong. So the correct interpretation of the Y-intercept is answer choice B. But again, we talked about why that's wrong. It doesn't use the correct number for this that we got with the slope, right? So the video game system costs $25. That's wrong for kind of 2 reasons. One, it's talking about the Y-intercept, and 2, it's wrong. So it's like double wrong. So So the video game system doesn't cost 25; it costs 100. So maybe like if the question asked, "What's the interpretation of the y-intercept?" Maybe B would be the correct answer. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. So they try to trick you by putting correct sounding answer choices in there. So there are other correct answer choices, but they don't necessarily answer the question, right? So the video game system costs $100. That's true, but it doesn't answer the question. And you see how C and D, they kind of mix and match the halves of the phrase of A and B. Okay, great. So just remember that slope is the change in y when x goes up by 1. So remember this example, and then you can always translate it to a word problem. Just make sure you use the units and the values in the word problem. So for this one, we realized y was total cost and x was the games. So instead of saying y increased by 25, I said the cost increased by 25. And instead of saying for each additional x, I said for each additional game purchased, because the x is the games. Okay, great. So 3 is A. Let's go on. Okay, so whenever you have an inequality or a system of inequalities and then a bunch of points in the answer choices, really the only thing you can do is guess and check. Okay, so we're just going to plug in each of these answer choices, and we'll see if it's true. So -1 if for y, I'm going to do A first. -1 and then less is -4. X is 2 plus 4. Okay, that gives us -1 is less than. So -8 plus 4 is -4. That is not true, right? -1 is bigger than -4. So this is false. So it's not A. Okay, let's try B. Okay, 1 is less than -4 times 2 plus 4. And that gives me 1 is less than -8 plus 4, which is -4 again. 1 is not less than -4. 1 is bigger than -4. This is wrong. Okay, let's keep going. 0, 5, C. So 5 is less than -4 times 0 plus 4. 5 is less than 4. Okay, that's not true. 5 is bigger than 4. Okay, so C is wrong. Let's check D. So, okay, so 0 is less than -4 times -4 plus 4. So that gives us 0 is less than 16 plus 4, which is 20. That is correct. 0 is less than 20. That is true. So this point satisfies the inequality. So the answer is D. That is it. All we got to do is plug in. And again, make sure every time you plug in that you use parentheses. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Okay, this is a loaded question. These ones trip up people a lot. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to break it down. It's not going to be perfect, but I'll do my best. Okay. So we have to look at this equation. So the first thing I always do is I focus on what's the units of the number on the other side of the equation. So if you see in the question, it says 63 has a unit of inches. Okay. So this equation has 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. Every term in the equation has to have the same units for the equation to make sense. Think about it, right? If I did like 2 inches plus 7 miles equals 9, what? That doesn't work, right? I can't add inches to miles. I have to convert one of them to miles, or convert inches to miles, or convert miles to inches, and then add them, right? So every term, every blob has to have the same units, okay? So if 63 has units of inches, that tells me that this blob must have units of inches. And this blob must have units of inches. Oh, that helps me a lot. Okay, Now, the question is asking me, what statement is the best interpretation of 6? Okay, so right away, I see 6 goes with y, and y is the number of sides of figure B. So I bet the answer choice has something to do with figure B. C and D mention figure A, so they're wrong. So right away, if you just read the question, you can cross off 2 of them. So that's really helpful. Okay, but now to really understand the right answer, you got to break it down even further. Okay, so it says y is the number of sides of figure B. So the units of y is sides. Okay. Now I have to multiply by something to get units of inches. Okay. So, so what do I multiply by? Well, so you got to think very carefully. If you've done unit conversions, if you've done chemistry class, you probably are familiar with this. So watch what I do. Okay. So I want the sides to go away, and I want to be left with inches. So I'm going to put the thing that I want to cancel on the opposite side. So I want to get rid of sides. So I'm going to put sides on the opposite side of the division sign. So I'm going to put sides on the bottom. So that way they cancel, right? And then I'm going to put what I want, so what I want to convert to, on the top. So we want inches, right? Ah, so the unit of 6 is, the units of the 6 is, sorry, just real quick. Okay, the units of the 6 is inches per side, or inches each side. So there are 6 inches in each side of figure B. Okay, so division sign and units, we usually say per, or we say each. Okay. Oh, you see, answer choice A has the word each in it, right? Inches per side, inches for each side. So the answer is A. And do you see how if we multiply them together, right, sides would cancel and we would be left with inches, and that's what we wanted, right? So we did a good job. We found the correct units for 6, and then we interpreted it in the context of the problem. Okay, so these ones can be really tricky, but take my advice. I would pay really close attention to the units of the thing on the other side, because it's usually just one number, right? And then you can kind of extrapolate that and make it the units of each term. Okay, and again, same with the slope question we just did. There are answer choices in here that are correct, maybe, but it's not what they're asking you. Okay, so I saw 6 was related to figure B, so I went right away. Okay, there's no way it's C or D because that talks about figure A. Okay, so really each side of figure A has a length, I guess, of 3. And then the number of sides of figure A would be X because it says that in the question, right? And then the number of sides of figure B is Y. Okay, so do you see how these answer choices are actually talking about different things? It's talking about Y, 3, and X. But we want to know about the 6, right? So we saw that it had to have units of inches per side, and it's about figure B. So, okay, so the answer is A. I hope that cleared it up at least a little bit. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so you can take a minute to read this question. I'll just do it below. So we have to write 2 equations. This is a system of equations question. So I'll just use R for raspberries and B for blackberries. So $5.50 per pint and $3 per pint, and then at store A, it costs $37. So 5.50 R plus 3B equals 37. Okay, and for the second one, we have 6.50 per pint of raspberries and $8 per pint of blackberries. Okay, so you see I'm going to multiply raspberries by 650 and then 8 times blackberries. And I get what is it? It says it's equal to store B has a price of $66. So I got that from the couple sentences in the question. And now I just have to solve it. This is the tricky part. So it might be easier to eliminate B here because there's no decimals, but I'm pretty sure, it's not really clear, but I'm pretty sure there's a calculator is allowed on this. So here's my strategy. It says it wants us to find the blackberries, right? So so by the way, this is not really a good problem for substitution. You see, it would be a lot of work to get one of the letters by itself and then substitute. So when we have standard form like this, we tend to like elimination. So I recommend doing elimination here. So if we want to find B, we don't want to eliminate B because then that'll give us R, right? So you always want to eliminate the one that you don't want. Okay, so eliminate the one you don't want. So we want to find B, so we're going to eliminate R. That's our strategy. We're going to eliminate the one we don't care about. Okay, so that'll save us a little bit of time in the long run, hopefully. Maybe not here because we got some messy decimals, but all right. So what we have to do is we have to get the same number in front of the R for both equations, and then we have to make sure they have opposite signs, and then we'll add them. So least common multiple of 5.5 and 6.5. Well, I can't think of anything, so I'm just going to multiply them together. So I'm doing this on a calculator. 5.5 times 6.5 is 35.75. So I'm going to multiply each equation by the other one, and I will get 35.75. So watch. I'm going to multiply the top one by 6.5. And then I'm going to multiply the bottom one, and I want it to have opposite signs, right? So I'm going to multiply the bottom one by negative 5.5. Okay, I'm gonna just rapid fire this. You could do this on a calculator. Just make sure you distribute to everything. Okay, so and there's multiple ways to tackle this elimination. This is just what I thought was easiest. It's not necessarily what everyone finds is easiest. 35.75 R plus 19.5 B equals 240.5. And then we have negative 35.75 R minus 44B equals negative 363. Okay, so you see how we got what we wanted. We got the same number in front of R, but opposite signs. Okay. So now we can add the two equations, and R will be eliminated. So 35.75R plus negative 35.75R. Okay, so that just goes away, right? That's 0. 19.5 plus negative 44 is, I think it's negative 24.5B. And those guys added is negative 122.5. Now to solve the equation, I divide both sides by negative 24.5. And I get B equals 5. And that is it. So again, if you wanted to, just to make it easier, you could have just eliminated the B's and then plugged in, but that might have taken a little bit longer. Like, it's a little questionable for this one, but it might have taken a little bit longer in the long run. So I highly recommend that as a general rule of thumb, you always eliminate the letter that you don't want, okay? All right, let's move on. So the answer is what? C, right? Good. All right, let's move on. Question 7. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this one. Hopefully, I'm hoping that this kind of screams standard form to you guys. So standard form of a quadratic is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So that should kind of remind you of standard form. So there's a couple ways to do this. Here's what I think is the easiest. So whenever it asks you for the minimum or the maximum of a quadratic, You have to find the vertex, specifically the y-coordinate of the vertex, which we call k. So when we do math, we call the vertex, it's h comma k, right? So you should, as soon as you see the word minimum or maximum mentioned on a quadratic question, you should be thinking vertex. I have to find the vertex. Okay, so here's how you find the vertex in standard form. At least it's one way to do it. This is what I think is the easiest personally. This is what I do. So first you write down ABC. So A is 1. There's no X, right? So B is 0. And C is 55. So H is equal to negative B over 2A. That's an equation you probably want to have memorized going into the test. H equals negative B over 2A. So you have negative 0 over 2 times 1. So 0 divided by anything is just 0. So H is 0. Now to find K, I plug in the X coordinate, plug in the H. So I'm going to plug in 0 for X, okay? So I get 0 squared plus 55, which is 55. So the vertex is H comma K is 0 comma 55. And remember, the y-coordinate of the vertex is what tells us the minimum or the maximum, okay? The y-coordinate of the vertex is what tells us the minimum or the maximum. So the y-coordinate of the vertex is 55. So the answer is 55. That is it. There's a couple other ways to do this one. For starters, you could kind of rewrite this in vertex form. So vertex form is like y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And if I rewrite this equation, see if this makes sense to you. G of x equals x minus 0 squared plus 55. So see how if I rewrote that, it kind of looks like vertex form. I did minus 0, right? Subtracting 0 doesn't do anything. It's still just the same as x squared. So do you see here, h is 0 and k is 55. So the vertex is 0 comma 55. That was another way maybe you could think about it. And you still get the y value, which is the minimum, which is 55. Okay. I think like I said, the easiest way to get the vertex from standard form is just h equals negative b over 2a and then plug in. That's it. H equals negative b over 2a and then plug in. You can do that for any standard form quadratic and it'll work. Sure, you got to memorize the equation, but it makes the process a lot easier than, say, doing something like completing the square. It makes it go a lot faster. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so we got an equation and we got 2 points. So chances are they give us an equation and points on the SAT. We got to plug in, right? So your mind's eye should be drawn to this 0. So why don't we plug in the point with the 0 first? Because 0 is a special number. Maybe something nice will happen. Okay. So let's plug in 0. So 10 is y, which is synonymous with h of x. So I'm going to replace h of x with 10. If you want to quickly just rewrite this as y equals a to the x plus b, you could, if that makes it easier for you to understand. Y and f of x, g of x, h of x, all synonymous, okay? So let me plug in 0 comma 10. So 10 equals a to the 0 plus b. Okay, so a to the 0 is just 1, so 10 equals 1 plus b. Okay, so if I subtract 1 from both sides, b equals 9. Okay, that's important. Let's rewrite the equation. I'm just going to use y. Y equals a to the x plus 9. And now I'll plug in the second point. So 325 over 36 equals a to the negative 2 plus 9. I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. Again, you can use a calculator. So I'm pretty sure you can use a calculator. So make sure you type it in carefully. You either use the fraction bar or you use parentheses, okay? So 325 over 36 minus 9 just gives you 1 over 36. And a to the negative 2, we can make that a positive exponent by writing it as, so you flip it, and then you make the exponent positive. So that's how negative exponents work. That's your rules of exponents. So we flip it and make it positive. So I can rewrite this as 1 over a squared, and hopefully you guys are seeing, oh, a squared must be equal to 36. So a squared equals 36. Take the square root of both sides. A is equal to plus or minus 6. It could be positive or negative 6. But because in the question it says A and B are positive constants, okay? So that means A must be positive 6. So A must really be positive 6. Okay, so AB is equal to, A is 6 and B is 9. So AB is equal to 54, and that is the final answer. Okay. All right, let's keep going. 9. Okay, so when we solve an equation with squares, what we can do is we like to take the square root of both sides. But you see, we got to take the square root of a negative number. Okay. And the SAT is never going to ask you to implement imaginary numbers to solve an equation like this. So you just stop right away and go, there's no real solutions, right? You can't take the square root of a negative number in the real number set. So this one has no real solutions, okay? Because when you go to take the square root, it just doesn't work, okay? Now that might be a little bit of a cop-out. So what if you didn't realize that? Okay, so if you didn't realize that, you could try to solve this by foiling. So x minus 1 times x minus 1. So x minus 1 squared is x minus 1 times x minus 1. And then if you FOIL that, you would get x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals negative 4. Now to solve a quadratic, we get everything to one side, right? So I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and I get x squared minus 2x plus 5 equals 0. Now we could use what's called the discriminant to figure out. So obviously this is much longer than the first way I showed you, is to just recognize the square root problem. But I just wanted to show another way and teach another concept. So we could do what's called the discriminant. D equals b squared minus 4ac. And the discriminant will tell us how many solutions it has. So b squared, that's negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. If you plug all that in, you get the discriminant is equal to 4 minus 20, which is negative 16. Okay, so the discriminant is negative. So when the discriminant can either be negative, equal to 0, or greater than 0. So when it's less than 0, there's no real solutions. When it equals 0, there's one real solution. And you definitely got to know this for the test. So even if it's not that helpful for this question, it might be helpful for another one. When d is greater than 0, there's 2 real solutions. Okay, I think I got that right. So the discriminant here is negative 16, so that's negative. So there's no real solutions. Okay. So that just verifies what we came up with before. So there's 0 real solutions, no real solutions. I want to point out too that a quadratic equation can only have, as we just talked about, no real solutions, 1 real solution, or 2 real solutions. So even without doing any work, you could kind of realize that C is wrong. There's no way it could have infinitely many, because it's a quadratic equation, and quadratic equations cannot have infinitely many solutions. They can only have 0, 1, or 2. Okay, so I hope that helps. Even if the discriminant is not useful for this question, you'll learn something relevant for the test, right? Okay, let's keep going. All right. When we have an expression with algebraic fractions, we have to find a common denominator. So finding common denominators can be really hard for kids, right? With x in it. So I don't want to go into too much detail about it here because it would take a really long time. But for now, what you always want to do is you want to factor out the denominators. I look at these denominators. There's nothing I can factor, right? And do you see how one is not a factor of the other? They don't go to each other. So that means that the least common denominator must be just the two denominators multiplied together. So the least common denominator is just x plus 1 times 4x minus 5. So our goal is to get the denominator for both of these terms to look like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the right one by his missing ingredient, 4x minus 5 over 4x minus 5. So you have to multiply it by the top and the bottom. So that way you're just multiplying by 1, so it doesn't change the value of the expression. And then I'm going to multiply the left one by his missing ingredient, which is x plus 1 over x plus 1. Okay, so, I get x plus 1, 4x minus 5. Then I'm going to do 4 times x plus 1. So if I distribute that, that's 4x plus 4. Then I'm going to do 1 times 4x minus 5. Okay, that's just 4x minus 5. Don't forget about this minus sign out in front, okay? Don't forget about that. That didn't go anywhere, okay? And we have on the bottom x plus 1, 4x minus 5. Okay, so we're good. Now that we have a common denominator, we can combine these fractions, right? So I'm going to put it under one denominator. And I'm going to do 4x plus 4 minus 4x minus 5. So remember, you have to distribute this minus sign to these guys, okay? So it's really 4x plus 4 minus 4x plus 5, okay? So 4x minus 4x goes away. 4 plus 5 is 9. So the answer is 9 over x plus 1 times 4x minus 5, which is answer choice A. Okay, very good. So coming up with common denominators can be hard when we're dealing with variables, right? So there's some more advice I could give you, but I don't want to go into it now. It comes with practice, okay? It's the kind of thing that comes with practice, okay? So this is the kind of thing that, if you're struggling with this, you might want to do a chapter or two in a prep book about this. Okay, so first, this isn't going to be super in-depth, but let's just briefly talk about, for question 11, let's talk about percent multipliers, okay? So, when you have a decrease, you multiply by 1 minus the decimal. And when you have an increase, you multiply by 1 plus the decimal. So for example, let's say I have $75, and I'm going to do a 25% decrease, or a 20% decrease. So I would change it to a decimal, so divide by 100. So 20 divided by 100 is 0.2. And then I would do 1 minus 0.2 because it's a decrease, right? So 1 minus 0.2 gives me 0.8. So I'd multiply by 0.8. Then let's say I wanted to do a 30% increase. So I would multiply by the decimal. So the decimal is 0.3, and I would do 1 plus the decimal. 1 plus the decimal. So 1 plus 0.3 is 1.3. So I'd multiply by 1.3. If you need practice on this, I would just Google percent multipliers worksheet and do a bunch of these over and over again. Okay, so I think we should make like a little table. So let's kind of keep this in mind. So x and f of x, or you could just write y, whatever is easier. And I'm going to write 0, 1, 2. And f of 0, so when x is 0, y is 86. That's what this is saying. When x is 0, y is 86. The thing inside the parentheses is 0. The thing on the other side of the equals is y. So y, or f of x, is 86. Now it says, for each increase in x by 1, the value of f of x decreases by 80%. Okay, so we got to see how in my table x is going up by 1. Okay. So we got to do a percent multiplier. So 80% as a decimal, that's 0.8. Because as a decrease, we're going to do 1 minus the decimal. 1 minus 0.8 is 0.2. So we're going to multiply by 0.2. If you do that on a calculator, you get 17.2. And then we're going to do it again, times 0.2. If you do that on a calculator, because it says every time x goes up by 1, this happens, right? So if you do that on a calculator again, you get 3.44. So this last line, if you put it back in function notation, f of x equals y. So f of 2 equals 3.44. So the final answer is 3.44. It's a grid in. You could also put this as an improper fraction, which would be 86 over 25. Okay, so I hope that quick lesson on percent multipliers helped. Again, it's like, if you need more help on that, Google percent multipliers worksheet. Search on YouTube percent multipliers, and then just practice it a bunch until it becomes second nature. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, so we have a line, 2y equals 4.5. It says that. And then we have a parabola, or a quadratic. This is called a linear quadratic system. So, linear quadratic system, very similar to quadratics. We'll come to that in a second. They can have no solution, one solution if the line just barely grazes the parabola, or it could just go right through the middle, right? And then it could have two solutions. Okay. So how we like to solve these is substitution. What I like to do is I like to get y by itself in both of them and then just set it equal. Okay, that's just a nice clean y substitution, right? So 2y equals 4.5. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to get y by itself. And I get y equals 2.25, right? So now I can substitute for y, or in other words, I can just kind of set them both equal because y is by itself in both of them, right? So here's how I did it. 2.25 equals negative 4x squared plus bx. So first, for a quadratic, you want to get all the terms to one side. So I rewrote this as 0 equals negative 4x squared plus bx minus 2.25. Now you see, we can use the discriminant because it's a quadratic, right? We just talked about the discriminant. No solution, one solution, two solution. Okay. So let's do that. So A is minus 4, B is just B, and C is minus 2.25. So we're going to plug it in, B squared minus 4AC, and we get B squared minus 4 minus 2.25. That gives us B squared minus 36. And because it has, we just talked about this before, so I'm not going to write it again. Because the question says it has exactly 1 point of intersection, so that means it has one solution. So if it has one solution, remember we said that means the discriminant is equal to 0. So b squared equals 36. So b equals plus or minus 6, because we take the square root of both sides, right? And whenever we take the square root of a square in an equation, we got to remember that plus or minus sign, okay? Because right, 6 times 6 is 36, but negative 6 times negative 6 is also 36, right? Okay, now it says b is a positive constant. Okay, so it can't be negative 6, so it has to be 6. So the answer to this one is 6. Okay, so notice how when we substituted a linear quadratic system, it became just a normal quadratic equation, and we could use the discriminant to figure out the solutions. That's it. Okay, so here's what you got to remember for these ones. The actual y values are the dots, okay? And the predicted y values come from the line. So when I say it comes from the line, I mean like the points along the line are the predicted y values, okay? So it says when x is 32, okay, so that's here, right? What is closest to the y value predicted, okay? So we want the predicted y value. So what lots of people would do here is they would look at this dot, but that's not right. That's the actual y value. We want the predicted y value. So we're going to look at, I'm going to do my best to circle it because it's really tiny. Here, see how we're going to actually look at the line itself? So I see that's between, what, 2 and 3, right? It's kind of in the middle of 2 and 3. The only one that's between 2 and 3 is 2.4. So the answer is C. So always remember, the actual y values are the dots. And the predicted y values, you look at the line. So when it says predicted, look at the line. When it says actual, you look at the dot. That's it. All right, I don't know how many items we're starting with, so why don't we just call that X? Then it says 40% of them are red. So I can do times 40%, that's 0.4. So we don't have to do percent multipliers like before because it doesn't say increase or decrease, it just says of. So we just multiply. So 40% as a decimal is 0.4. Then I'm going to multiply by, it says, of the red items, 30% have stripes. So to find how many have red and have stripes, I'm going to do times 0.4 and then times 30%, 0.3. Now, if you go on your calculator and do x times 0.4 times 0.3, you get x times 0.12. So what this is saying is that of the red and the stripes one, 0.12 times the original gives me how many are red and have stripes, right? So I can now change this back to a percent. So multiply by 100, and we get 12%. I kind of glossed through that one, so I hope at least it helped a little bit. It's a little hard to explain, but the key thing here is when you see percent of, okay, the big takeaway, when you see percent of, you just multiply by the percent as a decimal. So all we had to do is divide by 100. We didn't have to do 1 plus the decimal or 1 minus the decimal. That's only for percent increases and decreases, okay? And you see these percents, they kind of stack and combine through multiplication, okay? You don't add them. So lots of people would maybe do 40 minus 30 or 40 plus 30. And those are your trap answers, right? But you're never going to add or subtract percents like that on the SAT. So, okay. Great. Okay, so the answer is B. Okay, let's look at 15. Okay, so this is a rate unit conversion question. It says 353 kilograms per 1 cubic meter. So I can write that like this. Per means division. Per cubic meter or per 1 cubic meter, kind of like miles per hour. I'm actually going to use this as a unit conversion. So 353 kilograms gives me 1 meter cubed, okay? So watch, we got a mass of 345 kilograms. So we're going to do a unit conversion. The thing that goes on the bottom is the thing you want to cancel. Okay, it's you want to cancel out the kilograms. You want to put it on the opposite side of the division sign. So, let's say I did 1 meters cubed over 353 kilograms. Okay. So you see, kilograms over kilograms is just 1. So the units of kilograms will cancel. Okay. And I'm left with meters cubed. Now, if you did it wrong and you saw that it didn't cancel, all you got to do is flip the 2 units. So like, let's say you put 1 meter cubed on the bottom and 353 kilogram on the top. As long as you write it down and you check to make sure the units cancel, you'll notice that they don't cancel. And you can flip it and make it correct, right? You got to, even if you were just guessing, you got a 50-50 chance of guessing right? But you'll always get it as long as you check to make sure it cancels, okay? So this was a little strange. Maybe you guys haven't seen this. We use this rate to kind of do like what's called a rate unit conversion. Anyway, so now I'm going to carefully type this into a calculator. So 345 parenthesis 1 over 353 parenthesis. And that will give us 0.977337, something like that, meters cubed. Okay. Now it says that it's in the shape of a cube. So you should know that the equation for the volume of a cube is volume equals s cubed. So it's equal to 0.977337, whatever. And to get rid of the cube, we're going to take the cube root of both sides. So we do that, and we get s equals like 0.992, something like that. And we see in the answer choice it says was the length of one of the edges, so the edge or the side, right, of the cube. And 0.992, oh, that's b, right? Okay, so we had to do a unit conversion, and then we had to recall a volume formula. The volume formula, they have like length times width times height on the formula sheet, but you really should know for a cube that volume is s cubed, because that makes these questions a lot more approachable. Great. All right, this can be a tricky one. It's a similar triangles question. So we have 2 nearby trees. So I'm going to do my best to draw this. I'm not going to draw a tree at the top, so just pretend that line is the tree, okay? So we have 2 trees of different heights, right? So a big one and a short one. And they're casting shadows, okay? So like if the sun's coming from that way and then it's got a shadow. That one's got a shadow however long, and then this one's got a shorter shadow, something like that. Okay, so, and then we can do this. Okay. One of these trees is 10 feet tall and has a shadow that is 5 feet long. At the same time, the shadow of the other tree is 2 feet long. Okay, so the little shadow is 2. So this is the little shadow, that's the smaller one, right? And the larger shadow, this whole thing, is 5. And it says one of these trees is 10 feet tall and has a shadow that's 5 feet long. So the shadow that goes with the tree that goes with the big shadow is the tall tree. So this one is 10. We want to find the height of the other tree. Okay, so let's call that x. So the height of this tree is x. So what you got to know about similar triangles is that the corresponding, so first of all, anytime you have a triangle within a triangle, they're similar. So just trust me on that. It's called nested triangles. Okay, so anytime you have a nested triangle, the 2 triangles are similar. Okay. So now what you got to know is that for similar triangles, the corresponding angles are equal, and you got to know that the corresponding side lengths are proportional. So we want to find a side length, right? So we're going to set up our proportion. I like to do big over small. You could do small over big, but I like to do big over small. So corresponding big over corresponding small. So watch. You see how 5 is the big side of the triangle? And then the corresponding little triangle side is 2. So I'm going to write big over small, 5 over 2. And then this one's a little bit easier to see. Big 10 over small x. 10 over x. Great, so now you got an equation, and all you got to do is cross multiply. So 5x equals 20. Divide both sides by 5, x equals 4. The answer is B. So we had to make a picture, we had to label it very carefully, and then we had to set up a proportion for the similar triangle sides. Anytime you have a triangle within a triangle, the triangles are similar on the SAT. Anytime, okay? All right, we're almost done. Okay, this one, it talks about the rectangle, the diagonal of a rectangle. I'm just going to draw it this way. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so the diagonal is 5 root 17. And the short side is 5. What is the length of the longer side? Okay, let's call that x. Okay, this is testing you on the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared for right triangles, where a and b are the legs and c is the hypotenuse. All you have to do is plug all this in. That is it. Okay, so x squared plus 5 squared equals 5 root 17 squared. So just be very careful when you type that in the calculator. Make sure you use parentheses. Okay. If you were going to do it by hand, you would distribute the 2 and you would do 5 squared times root 17 squared. So squaring the square root just makes the square root go away. Okay. 5 squared times 17, which is 25 times 17. Okay. So if you were doing this by hand, you could do it like that. Okay. But I'm pretty sure this is a calculator allowed question. So I wouldn't waste all that time doing that. So just make sure you use parentheses like I did here. Okay. So 5 squared is 25. And 5 root 17 squared is 425. Okay. So I subtract 25. X squared equals 400. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So x equals plus or minus 20. But because it's a geometry problem, we can't have a negative length, right? So it has to be positive. So x is 20. And the answer is B. That is it. It's just a Pythagorean theorem question. That's it. Again, I think the part that really trips people up, that's probably going to trip people up, is like they're going to forget to put the parentheses around 5 root 17. So just make sure you do that. Whenever you plug something in and it looks messy, like it has a negative sign or it has multiple numbers or multiple letters, make sure you always put parentheses. When in doubt, always put parentheses. Okay, so the answer is B. So we got one more. There's only 18 questions. It's not a lot to go off of. Hopefully they release the digital SAT practice test soon. Okay, so we have something like this. So O, and then points A and B lie on the circle. So A and B. And it says that the measure of the arc is 45 degrees. So you should know that the measure of an arc in degrees is equal to the central angle. So the angle that it makes with the center. So watch, this angle is also 45 degrees. Okay, so the formula for arc length is theta over 360 times 2 pi r. And don't get me wrong, you definitely need to know that for the test. You also need to know sector area, which is theta over 360 times pi r squared. Okay. For this though, I would just set up a proportion. So like the pizza, like the part is proportional to the whole. Okay. So the central angle, theta, is proportional to the whole, the total number of degrees, which in a circle is 360. There's 360 degrees. And then the arc length is proportional, that's the part. So the arc length is like the pizza crust, the length of the pizza crust, but not in degrees, in like inches or meters or something, like length, right? Over the is a part of the circumference. So the circumference is like the total perimeter of the circle, not just the length of the pizza crust. Okay. So you see how part over whole, 45, or theta over 360 equals arc length over circumference. So part over whole, part over whole. So now we just plug in the numbers. So 45 is theta, the central angle, over 360. It says the length of the arc is 3, and we want to find the circumference. So similarly to the ones we were just doing, we just cross multiply. 45c equals 3 times 360, which is 1080. Divide both sides by 45, and we get c equals 24. So you could set up a proportion. You could use the arc length formula. I just thought the proportion was easier for this one. You could also use the arc length formula. It doesn't matter. Actually, no, you would struggle with this, the way I wrote this arc length formula, because you don't know the radius. So it would probably be better to do this proportion. Okay, so the circumference is 24. Okay, that is the answer, D. Okay, so that's the final question. We're all done. Thank you for watching. I really hope you found this video useful. I'm probably going to make more walkthroughs like this again, so let me know if you want to see more of this. And if you're interested in tutoring, again, I scored an 800 on the math, and I've been a test prep professional for a couple years now. So if you are interested in that, I'm going to put the links to my website and my contact information in the description. So check that out if you want. All right. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.